U.S. President Donald Trump is planning big cuts to funding for NASA, and that could mean big changes in space exploration. The plan is part of what Americans call the Big Beautiful Bill, and it would cut NASA's budget from $24.8 billion to $18.8 billion, triggering layoffs and program cuts. For a closer look at what these reductions mean, how they might affect Canada, we're joined by Professor Paul Delaney. He's professor of physics and astronomy at York University. Great to have you here, Paul.
Hi there, Anne-Marie.
So what specific programs will these cuts affect?
It's probably easier to say which ones will they not affect. It's a huge swath. If you think of a science program, that means orbiter around a distant planet like Juno going around Jupiter, Perseverance running around the surface of Mars. Think about any future space mission, even the Voyager spacecraft. Just about every single science project in NASA's repertoire is going to be impacted, if not cut, severely cut back. It really is one of the largest, and I'm going to use the term, assaults on science in NASA's history. Very, very sad if it goes through.
And this
underscore if.
Well, space exploration and the space race have always been big priorities to U.S. governments. Is this a move to make more room for privatization?
I guess that is one interpretation. The spin that the White House is putting on it is a refocusing on human exploration. So take away all of the funding associated with robotic exploration of the solar system and put it into human exploration. That's the spin. But at the same time, they're suggesting that the Space Launch System, that is the vehicle that NASA has developed to go to the moon, is going to be cut. So it's a little bit hard to read their commentary. Opening the door for SpaceX and other organizations, private organizations, certainly is a more realistic interpretation of what's happening.
Yeah, less moon, more Mars, I guess. China's President Xi Jinping said he wants to grow his country to be the leader in space exploration. So with space being part of China's military plan, if the U.S. is slashing its budget, China is expanding its program, what does that mean? And where does that put the balance of power when it comes to space exploration?
Well, I think it's a pretty obvious interpretation. China is pushing forward, has been for many years. They've done many space firsts. They're planning a Mars return mission in 2028. They're talking about humans on the moon in the early 2030s. All of that at a time where, as you said, NASA's budget is being primarily throttled back. The Mars return mission is being sidelined. I've just indicated that SLS is certainly on shaky ground, shall we say. There is little doubt that if NASA's budgets go through as stated, then they will, in fact, begin to take second place as far as exploration, human and robotic, in the solar system. And that's problematic, I think, for many people.
You know, something I've learned through all of these trade and tariff talks since January is just how integrated Canada and the U.S. space program is. Somebody compared it to like the auto industry, where there's a little bit of their parts, a little bit of our parts, plus, you know, there's our people and their people all working together. So where does Canada and our space program fit into these cuts to NASA?
Well, if you think about Canada's involvement in space exploration, so not just the Canadian Space Agency, but all of the researchers that are involved in space science, this cut in the NASA budget will impact them. So we're talking about researchers and graduate students basically having their projects, potentially their livelihoods, removed from them through no fault of their own. The Canadian Space Agency, as you've indicated, is certainly being integrated in all sorts of activities. The next version of the Canadarm, for example, was going to be built and developed for the Lunar Gateway Space Station, part of the Artemis project. That's on the chopping block. So the impact on Canada in terms of both hardware generation as well as research could be extremely significant, forcing us, of course, to go elsewhere to lend our expertise, which I think is what will happen to the European Space Agency and potentially in support of some aspects of the Chinese research.
You know, when we're looking at this race to get to Mars and, who gets there first, who can set up, civilization on Mars first, when you put that into a broader context of what's happening here on Earth, and this happens a lot in times where there's affordability crisis and people are saying, look, I can't afford food, housing is expensive or inaccessible. What argument is there for government spending on money and exploring life on Mars when we need to take care of life here on Earth?
While the focus is obviously at the moment on putting boots on Mars, let's not forget that to get there, you need to develop a variety of technologies. And those technologies almost invariably end up back in your hands, in your lifestyle. Last year, for example, NASA's budget was around about $24 billion. And it's estimated that the NASA activities generated approximately $75 billion worth of activity within the US economy alone. So that's in terms of jobs, in terms of spin-offs. Your cell phone technology has been powered in very large measure by the types of activities that we have developed going into space. The spin-offs are just almost incalculable. So it's not just a matter of putting boots on Mars, it's developing the technology that will get us there, and that technology basically ends up in society in very short order, faster now than it ever has in the past.
Paul Delaney, professor of physics and astronomy at York University. Always great to have you here. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Cheers.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.